Hello YouTube, welcome to yet another guide of mine. I'm uploading somewhat early because this patch is shorter than usual. Anyways, today we'll be going over the new Fire.Nihility character, Gunaifen. Let's start by heading on over to her base stats first. Her base HP and defense are on the lower end, so she may feel squishier as compared to the other 4-star Nihility characters. She has the same base attack as Luca. Her speed is the second highest among all Nihility units. Finally, her ult cost is 120. Coming over to her kit, her basic attack is the usual one-hit single target attack that generates a skill point. Her skill is a single hit blast attack that has a 100% base chance to inflict burn onto the enemies. The enemies will receive fire dots at the start of their respective turns, and this fire dot will last for 2 turns individually. Her ultimate is a single hit AoE attack. Further, if an enemy has a burn status on them, the ult triggers the burn status, producing damage equal to a certain percentage of their original damage. This works like Kafka's ult, but only for burns. Also, this should work for other sources of burn like Hook, Himeko, and Asta. Moving on to her talent, while she is on the field, there is a 100% base chance to apply the Fire Kiss debuff to an enemy after receiving Fire Dot. The Fire Kiss debuff can stack up to 3 times. This debuff is known as Vulnerability. This basically means that at level 10 talent, the damage output of your entire team is effectively increased by 21% against enemies with max stacks of Fire Kiss, assuming no other sources of vulnerability. For comparison, Pulse ult at level 10 effectively increases your team damage by around 26% against all enemies, assuming no other sources of defense should. This also doesn't specify that the burn needs to be from Fen herself, so other characters that can inflict burn and Kafka can apply Fire Kiss stacks. For Trace level of priority, you mainly want to level up the skill and talent and then her ultimate. Then, as for her Ascension traces, the Ascension 2 trace makes it so her basic attacks now have a 80% base chance to inflict burn onto enemies with the same dot multiplier as the skill that also lasts for 2 turns. This can make her a very good skill point generator as she doesn't have to rely on using the skill to apply burn. The Ascension 4 trace advances her forward by 25% at the start of the battle. This is good for single wave battles, but in multi-wave battles like we see in MOC, it feels horrible from the second wave onwards. But you still have to build enough speed to be faster than your DPS. The final Ascension trace gives her 20% damage bonus against burned enemies. If you level up all the trace nodes, she receives a total of 22.4% fire damage boost, 24% break effect, and 10% effect hit rate. At last, using her technique makes her attack the enemy and enter battle. After entering battle, she deals fire damage equal to 50% of her attack 4 times to a random single target enemy, with a 100% base chance of inflicting Fire Kiss on them. Since Fire Kiss is a stackable debuff, I believe you can have multiple stacks on one enemy with the technique depending on the RNG. And since this is RNG dependent, I wouldn't recommend using this over Kafka's technique to start the battle. So, to sum her kit up, her skill and basic attack apply burn and blast and single target with 100% and 80% base chance respectively. Her talent applies Fire Kiss whenever enemies receive 1 instance of Fire Dot, which is a raw damage increase for the entire team up to a maximum of 3 stacks. Finally, her ult triggers all burn statuses that are afflicted on any enemy on the field. I will be covering only the dot aspect of her kit as crit builds don't see much of a value in my opinion. Since she needs to apply burn onto enemies, you'll be looking to invest into effect hit rate. The lowest base chance in her kit is on her basic attacks. To guarantee burn against bosses with 40% effect res with 80% base chance, you are looking at 108% effect hit rate, which is unreasonably high to build. This is purely bosses, so instead try to focus on elites, since you'll be fighting elites over bosses in most scenarios. Now, elites have 30% effect res. With 50 to 70% effect hit rate, you have 84 to 95% chance to inflict burn. These are pretty good odds, so I'm going to recommend at least around 50% effect hit rate in total if you are weaving in a lot of basic attacks. Note that she gets 10% effect hit rate from trace nodes, so that means you need around 40% from relics. As for speed, she'll be sitting at 131 speed with speed boots. Just aim for at least 1 more speed than your DPS or Kafka if you're running her in a Kafka team. Do keep in mind that you'll have to accommodate for more speed in case you have Kafka with her signature light cone. Finally, to maximize her damage, you want to focus on attack percent and damage percent mainly. Defense shred from light cones and sets can be good as well. Coming to the relic sets, we are getting a dedicated set for dot characters in 1.5. The 2-piece effect increases attack by 12% and the 4-piece effect ignores 6% defense for every instance of dot status present on the enemy when damaging the enemy up to a maximum of 3 stacks, meaning 18% defense shred. In a Kafka team, you have 1 shock status from Kafka and 1 burn status from Fen. You can get the last instance of dot status from either breaking using another dot unit, Asta's basic attack, or Kafka's signature LC. Note that the enemy just needs to have 3 dot statuses regardless of the type. Other than this 4-piece option, there is the 4-piece fire set. Now, the skill damage percent increase from the 4-piece effect does not work. This is because the skill consists of a skill multiplier and a dot multiplier, and you're only buffing the skill multiplier when you're increasing skill damage percent. There is no 4-piece set worth farming right now, so just wait a little longer for the new set to arrive. The current best set is going to be 2-piece fire plus 2-piece attack if you satisfy speed and substats. If you do not wish to farm 2-piece fire, you can stick with 2-piece attack and 2-piece speed. Here is the relic set ranking with Kafka and Asta on the team. For planar, we're also gonna get a new planar dot set. It increases attack by 12% and when the wearer reaches 135 speed, you gain 12% damage bonus. If you reach 160 speed, you gain 20% damage bonus instead. The full effect is easier to satisfy with Asta on the team. This is going to be the best in slot planar set, but again you'll have to wait to farm this set. In the meantime, you can stick with Triple S or Fleet for dot teams. If you are running her outside of dot teams, Keel is going to be a great option, but do keep in mind that you need 30% effect rest total. For the body piece, go attack percent if you have a bunch of effect hit rate and substats across all relics, or vice versa. For boots, you want to go speed even on Kafka teams with Asta. Then fire damage boost on the sphere. Finally, for the rope, you want to go attack percent. With energy rope, you'll get ults faster, but your overall damage is hindered. There is not much of a point in my opinion. The general rule of thumb for a damage dealer when it comes to the rope is that you want to equip whatever the character scales with. In this case, it's attack percent. To summarize, aim for 50 to 70% effect hit rate with at least 1 speed effectively higher than your DPS. Then focus on more attack percent and subs. Effect rest should be at least 30% if running Broken Keel. Fire type does have a good break, but it's not good enough to max out break effect. With Asta, you're most likely breaking with her anyway. However, break effect can be fine in substats, but I wouldn't recommend going out of your way to hunt for that. HP and defense can help her sustain better since she is sort of squishy. For 5-star options, you may use any one of them except Welt's Light Cone. This is because the second effect doesn't work for her dots. The effect hit rate and attack buffs apply only during her skill and will vanish away after the skill goes through. When the enemy receives fire dot, it takes into account the current stats of Fen and well, she will not have those buffs at the time of the dot. This is why this LC works for Kafka, because Kafka has a dot trigger during her skill to take advantage of the buffs from this LC. The Nihility Cone from the Herde shop is an okay option, but isn't really worth going for if you have the gacha 4-star light cones. Her best in slot light cone, even over the 5 stars for best damage, is Good Night and Sleep Well at a high superimposition. You can easily stack 3 debuffs for the max buff possible in case of a Kafka team. You have Shock from Kafka and then Burn and Fire Kiss from Fen. Note that the damage percent boost affects both dot and non-dot damage. The next great 4-star is Eyes of Prey. This gives Fen a damage percent boost for only dots and effect hit rate, making it easier to build her. Then there is the Pearl LC, which may not offer a great amount of personal damage, but it does buff your DPS as it reduces the enemy's defense. This will see better value with the new sets in 1.5 since you're stacking up defense. I would recommend using this once you have this at least S3. Also, I want to point out that there is a small issue when your DPS takes a turn right after the enemy. Finally, we have Fermata, which is the best F2P cone since you can S5 it from the MOC shop. Note that the enemy needs to have Shock or Wind Shear on them for the passive to work. This pairs well with Kafka on the team. Rest of the currently available light cones feel quite underwhelming to me. So here's the ranking for light cones for personal damage. She is honestly a universal support that can be placed in any team, but let's have a look at some notable synergies. First one that comes to mind is, well, Kafka. I personally really like running Asta and Kafka teams. Fan also benefits from the 18% fire damage boost trace from Asta. So I'd recommend running Kafka, Asta, Sustain, and a dot character. You can fill in the dot character based on the enemy weakness. And this is how I would build Asta for dot teams. Of course, feel free to run whatever you like and have fun with. Other than Kafka, her kit synergizes somewhat well with fire characters that can apply burn. So this goes for Asta's basic attack, Hook's skill, and Himiko's attacks. With more burn applications, you can stack up fire kits faster and have her ult trigger extra burns. This isn't anything major to be honest, but I just wanted to point it out. Other than these teams, she basically functions the same as Pela with how she effectively buffs your team damage. Her E1 reduces the effect rate of the attacked enemies by 10% for 2 turns with a 100% base chance. This will reduce her personal effect hit rate requirements by a bit. You can get away with around 40% effect hit rate with this Eidolon. This also means your entire team needs less effect hit rate as well. E2 increases the multiplier of her dots by 40% when the enemy targets are burned. Her E3 increases her skill level by 2 and basic attack level by 1. E4 regenerates 2 energy for her every time she burns her enemies. Note that this applies to burns caused only by her and not her teammates. E5 increases her ult and talent levels by 2. At last, her E6 increases the fire kiss stacks from 3 to 4. Note that E6 helps your team damage as well. Here is the increase in damage with each Eidolon. So overall, her E1 makes it easier to build effect hit rate for your team. E2 and E3 are great pickups for damage. E4 is a nice quality of life addition for energy. And finally, E6 increases the entire team's damage. While she may function the best in Kafka teams, the Fire Kiss debuff remains universal. This means that you can slot her in a lot of team comps. She's providing damage increase to the entire team while also doing some meaningful damage with her dots. I do have a few tips on how you should play her. At the start of the battle, she will start at 60 energy. To stack up Fire Kiss faster, I do recommend using skill 2 times in the beginning into an ult, unless you get hit for at least 10 energy, in which case you can do 1 basic attack instead of a skill. If you are about to finish a wave and have your ult active, I suggest saving it for the next wave. Do keep in mind that in a new wave you will have to skill or basic first before using your ult to take advantage of the burn trigger on the ult and also stack up Fire Kiss. Also, assuming there is one elite and a boss or another elite like we see in MOC, after using her skill on them, you can juggle between the two with your basic attacks as long as you manage to apply the burn status on them, making her very skill point positive. To recap my thoughts, here are her pros and cons. Let's now assess her pull value. She's definitely nice to have if you already own Kafka against fire weak enemies, but she's far from a must-have in my opinion. If you are looking for another Pela, she's about as good. She's honestly a great pickup. However, it's up to you if you want to risk building pity for her if you do not want Topaz. Thank you for making it to the end of this video. This was sort of short compared to my other videos as there is not much to cover about this character in particular. Nevertheless, I do hope you guys learned a few things from this guide. Also, thank you for all the subs. We are extremely close to the 1k milestone. It would be great if you managed to hit it with this video. I greatly appreciate the support. With that said, I will catch you guys on my Topaz and Numby video coming up this weekend. Peace!